Welcome, everyone, to this meeting of the East Coast Cooperative, a group of 7 chapters in Eastern Canada and the United States who are working together to bring you more great presentations. I am Bruce McClure, the chair of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter in Maine and New Hampshire, and tonight we have another great speaker for you. Current online data in MLB team winning and losing streaks is somewhat limited, consisting mostly of listings of the longest streaks in each league and/or team. To expand content, this presentation provides a comprehensive examination of streaks from a practical analytic perspective, using basic probability theory and an easy-to-understand sliding decision sequence. It develops and explains a set of mathematical expressions verified by simulations that predict the frequency and length of winning and losing streaks. A byproduct of the meticulous research for this paper is a user interactive database which provides graphical, seasonal timelines of every MLB team's winning and losing streaks since 1901. The ultimate goal is to convert the user interactive database into a hands-on tool for fans to visualize and explore baseball's all-time winning and losing streaks. Ed Denta is a retired electrical systems engineer, a lifelong baseball fanatic and trivia buff. During his professional working career, Ed got out from behind the desk to fuel his passion for the sport by umpiring high school baseball on Florida's Gulf Coast for 18 years. God bless him. In retirement, he combines his analytical background with his fervor of sports history and statistics to research and author sports-related documents and products. He is an active member of SABR's Roush Lopez Tampa Bay chapter. Ed Denta, welcome. How are you this evening?
I am great. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. I see Don, one of our members over there. Hi, Don.
Bishop is also one of your members. She is a new member of SABR. Bishop Lay is here this evening, and we are thrilled to have her this evening. I wanted to let everyone know that this is not a presentation that you have to raise your hand and wait till the end tonight. You can open up your mics and ask questions as we go. Ed has requested that. So, and according, Alec would like to know if there is going to be a test at the end, and as far as I know, there is not.
There's also the
one if you'd like. So.
There's also a shout out to the Pacific Northwest chapter of SABR. I always miss the meetings. I believe one of my chapter mates, Alec. Alec is here.
Yes, he is.
So, Alec, I won't get to see you this weekend yet again. It's like the third meeting I've missed in a row. I will make it to one. So it's our chapter meeting for Pacific Northwest SABR this weekend in Seattle on Saturday, November 9th. That's important to mention that as well. Thank you.
Ed, it's all yours. Go get them.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share the screen. You see the cover sheet there?
Perfect.
Okay. The short title of my presentation is called A Geek's Peek at Streaks. High school geek, I was one, but I became a little bit more than a geek. Got really involved with analytical and technical stuff in my career. That picture is not me. That picture is my brother Bob, who's joined us online from Springfield, Illinois. Bob is not a geek, but his high school picture is a little bit better than mine. So, all right. As you probably would be aware, geeks, when they peek at something or analyze, take a look, they dig deep. So this is kind of like a deep dive into streaks. And the subject, again, is winning and losing streaks of Major League Baseball since 1901. I want to digress just a little bit and give you some background here. As Bruce mentioned, you know, my background is engineering, and as I worked for 40 some years at that career field, I became quite interested and knowledgeable about databases, Excel files, and statistics, and coupling that with my passion for baseball. About 12 years ago, I started to develop a database that would have a user-friendly interface and display all the streaks of baseball, you know, graphically and as selected by the user. When I joined SABR about 2.5 years ago, you know, I read something that they were looking for more people to do research. So I decided I would take a hold of what I've done for the database and turn it into a research paper. And that basically is the subject of what I'm going to share today. Now, there is some math in this paper. There's some little bit of algebra and a little bit of probability theory, but anybody that's had a little bit of high school algebra probably will be able to understand. And that's one of the reasons why I want to leave it as an open forum. I'd like to go through it, have you understand it. And if you're kind of hung up on a little something, we could take a little time and I could explain it and we can go forward. Okay, so please feel free to interrupt and ask questions as you see fit. Okay, we're going to start off by taking a very high level look at winning and losing streaks. I call this the 10,000 foot look at streaks. What you see on the right hand side is a rolling summary of all streaks greater than equal or greater than 5 games through the 2023 season. Each dot represents the end of a streak of at least 5 games. The green dots are winning streaks and the black dots are losing streaks. You see some gray areas there on the right. Those are games that aren't played. As it scrolls through, you might see some strike seasons where there are less than the full complement of games played, etc. Okay, I've always got those on the right. Through 2023, there were 14,366 streaks of 5 games or more. The thing I want you to take away from this slide is the fact that the streaks appear to be random, and the distribution, you can see 2020 there was a strike year, or the COVID year, I should say, and the distribution of the streaks looks uniform. Okay. All right, so streaks.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
Could you go back to that graphic for 1 second? I don't know if it's my screen, but I see a yellow line in 1904.
Yes. Yeah, that yellow line, good catch. That yellow line is the Detroit Tigers, who had 10 ties. That's the most ties there's ever been in a season. Or I should say, we'll talk about this a little more later, ties or a game where no winner was determined. Okay.
Thank you.
So that's what that is. Yeah, I guess I stuck that in there. Okay, so 2 basic types of streaks, seasonal streaks and wraparound streaks. I'm only concerned with the seasonal streaks in this paper. A seasonal streak basically is a sequence of like decisions, either a win or loss, that are bounded on each end by either the opposite decision or season boundary. So you could have a seasonal streak that starts in game 1, or you can have a streak that ends in game 162. A wraparound streak would be streaks where you have like decisions that go from one season to the next, same decision, ending a season, beginning the next season, and they're terminated by a loss or an opposite decision, I should say, in each of the 2 seasons. Okay. Again, I'm only concentrating on seasonal streaks of 5 or more games. Let's talk a little bit about ties. Ties I consider a neutral result. They don't terminate the length of the streak, or I should say they don't terminate the streak, nor do they add to the length of the streak. You'll see this if we go and I show you my database later, you'll see the effects of that. So just as one quick example here, example 1, you see 4 red W's followed by an end of the season. That would be a 4-game seasonal win streak. I'm not going to be looking at that in the paper, but it's terminated here by the end of the season, EOS. If they started the next season with 2 games, that would be a 6-game wraparound streak. And I may have some research and work on wraparound streaks to share later. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to spend a little time on the next 2. This basically is what I call the test sequence slide model, and it forms the basis that allows me to develop these equations that predict the occurrence of streaks. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to detect a 5-game winning streak and also predict how many 5-game winning streaks a 500 team on the next slide can expect. Okay. So what we have here at the top is we have a 162 game season. Game numbers are here. The second line is a game sequence of wins and losses, hypothetical wins and losses for this this team, okay? And to determine where the 5-game win streaks are, I have to apply a test sequence that has 5 wins in the middle and a loss on each side. Like I said before, you know, in-season win streak has to have the opposite decision on each side. So the length of the streak, in this case, S, is 5, and the test sequence, TS, for a 5-game winning streak would be 7, and it consists of a loss, 5 wins, and a loss. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to line this sequence up at the beginning of the season, but you extend it 1 game to the left, because remember, a winning streak can start at the beginning of the season. You wouldn't have to have a previous loss, okay? So in this particular case, I'm going to always have this loss, 5-win loss pattern. And in the test 1 position, you compare the test sequence result to the game sequence results, and you basically count how many you have that match. So you can see this is a freebie. You can see the green checks here that match the 4 wins, and the 2 red X's are not matches. You have a loss here followed by a win. You have a win here followed by a loss. So all that tells you is there is not a 5-game win streak at the beginning of the season. And then what we do is we slide it over 1 game to the right. The same test sequence. Now the first loss is lining up with the beginning of the season. And again, in this particular case, we do not have a 5-game win streak. We have 4 out of 7 match. You see these 4 wins match these 4 wins in the game sequence, okay? Let's do it again. Test 3 will now line up the beginning of the test sequence between games 1 and 2. And lo and behold, this L, followed by 5 wins and another loss, matches the game sequence. So we've detected a 5-game sequence, you know, beginning in game 3, okay? So this process of sliding to the right, making a comparison and comparing the decisions continues until you get to the end of the season. The same thing's going to happen at the end. You could have a winning streak at the end, terminated by the end of the season, so you slide it 1 beyond, okay? So that process continues, and just for instruction purposes here, test 155, again, detected a second 5-game winning streak late in the season, okay? Is that all pretty straightforward for you? I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this on the next slide, okay? If there's no questions, I'm going to move on. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse here, and I guess I can close this, Bruce. If I close this window here, I'm not going to kill myself.
If you want to close do you want to stop sharing?
No, I want to share, but I want to see these 2 in front of it. I'll just do it like this.
Okay.
Okay. So what I've done here is I've given the test sequence graphic on the top, which we just reviewed, and I'm going to talk through it, and I'm going to come up and derive the expected streak equations, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, what is the probability of matching all 7 games in this test sequence, okay? And I'm going to call that the probability of a match. So in order to match all 7 games, in you know, any place in this game sequence, it's the probability of a loss times the probability of a win 5 times the probability of a loss. So in this case, it's probability to win raised to the 5th power times probability of loss squared. And if I'm talking about a 500 team here, which I am, I think I've cut off the stuff at the top. You know, the probability of win is 50-50, as well as the probability of loss. So the probability of matching all 7 games against this test sequence is 1/2 to the 7th power, or 1 in 128. No different than flipping a coin, which has a 50-50 chance of heads or tail. You flip it twice, you got a 1 in 4 chance of any particular sequence, and they say 2 heads. Okay, so the probability of matching the 7-game T sequence is 1 over 128. Now line 2, I'm going to determine how many opportunities do I have to match that 7-game test sequence within this 162 game season. So basically that's the number of test positions that I have. The answer here you could see is 158. And from an algebraic sense, it's the total number of decisions, 162, minus the length of the streak plus 1. So the streak length was 5, and the 1 adds 158. Now, what that means is if I have a very long streak I'm looking at, if I'm looking at a 15-game streak, I'm not going to have as many tests because I just have to slide it until, the loss at the end of the sequence gets over the boundary, okay? So that's why, the S is in here, okay? So now, if I know what the probability is of matching any particular 7-game sequence, and I know how many there are, if I multiply that probability, which is 1 over 128, times the number of opportunities, 158, I get basically 1 1/4. So what that means is that a 500 team can expect to get 1 1/4 5-game winning streaks in a season. Well, it's not possible to get a quarter, but if we look at the bigger term here, what that might be interpreted as is a 500 team in 5 162 game seasons. I'm sorry, in 4 seasons could expect 5 winning streaks. It's 1 1/4. So 5-game winning streaks in 4 seasons if you're a 500 team, okay? So if we generalize the equation just a little bit, this number of opportunities times the probability, okay, the probability as a function of the length of the streak is, if we're looking at winning streaks here, it's the probability of winning raised to the number of games in the streak times the probability of losing squared. You got the losses on either end times the number of decisions. Now, this coefficient here really is decisions minus S plus 1, but I'm going to just approximate it to D because most of the time you're going to be doing this. The number of decisions you're looking at is going to be much greater than the length of the streak you're looking at, okay? And then finally, for losses, it's just a little different. It's just flipped. If you're looking at the expected number of losing streaks, it's probability of losing a game raised to the streak length times the probability of winning squared times D again, okay? Does that kind of make sense? All right, I'm not getting too much feedback on that. I hope it does.
So far, so good. Feel free,
Okay.
folks, to jump right in if you have any questions or comments.
Right.
Go ahead.
All right, so
Ed,
to me,
excuse me.
go ahead.
Did you do this test sequence slide mode by hand, or did you create some sort of computer program to do that for you?
Well, no, it's by hand. This is my way of explaining the equations that I developed, and I'm going to move a little bit forward here and show you the equations. They're evaluated using Excel on a computer, and I'll show you those results. But to illustrate the concept, so that you understand that there really is some mathematics behind this stuff. I've just developed this model to help.
No, it's a wonderful model and it's very easy to follow. So thank you for doing it.
And there's randomness. I mean, you could talk about baseball having momentum, and my brother and I have been doing work on that. But if you were just flipping coins 100,000 times, you're going to get streaks of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, even 20 tails in a row. Okay, not very often, but you will get it. And so winning or losing is, not too much different if you take into account the probability of winning. A coin is 50-50. A team that's going to win 100 games, is 61.7 winning. So they're going to have more winning streaks and losing streaks, and you'll see that very soon here. Okay, so this is just the expected streak equations. It's kind of what you saw before. For winning streaks, we have the number of decisions times the probability of winning raised to the streak length power S, the probability of losing to the 2. Now that's only for one streak length, whatever the value of S is. In my case, I had a 5 there. But if I want to know how many total streaks and how many streaks of each length there are, I'm going to have to, substitute for S different values of streak length. So, and if I were to sum them all up, this is a summation sign, sigma in Greek, which if anybody knows a little bit of engineering here, we summed this equation for the values 5 through 26. The reason I said 26 is there's been a single 26 game winning streak. If you consider ties a neutral result, we could see that later. And then of course the losing streaks are the same, except you got the losing streak raised to the S power. And total streaks, just add the two of them. And it's just kind of expressed here. Now I did verify these equations by analysis. I actually, I won't spend any more time on that unless you want to hear what I did. So yes, I could verify these equations make sense by analysis, Excel analysis. Okay, so I don't know who's an engineer. I don't know who uses Excel. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this unless somebody wants me to, but this is basically a screenshot of the model to evaluate these streaks in Excel. The inputs are this probability of winning. The other input is the number of decisions. The streak lengths are here. Each of these cells here and here and here have equations that apply those equations on the previous sheet and give you some numbers. And in this particular case, I picked a really bad team, one of the worst teams in history of baseball. The 1919 Athletics had a 36-104 record, 257 winning percentage, very, very low. Just about as bad as the White Sox this year, and they played 140 games.
Alex Stays has a question, if we could get it in.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I think you're kind of getting to my question, which was, are you accounting for the distribution of talent across the different teams and, kind of that they're not at 500, so there would be kind of obviously more
the distribution of talent is
correlation of
what their winning
outcomes.
percentage is. Right.
Right, thanks.
Okay. All right, so in this particular case, they're expected to have 8 loss streaks of 5 games or more. You can see it's not all one number, but it sums up to 8. And they're not going to win much. You're not going to get a 5-game winning streak. Probability maybe is 1 in 10 if your record's this bad. Okay. All right. Now, this is kind of important. If we take those equations and we say evaluate them over a large number of decisions. In this particular case, I used 100,000 decisions. And if you plug in a 500 team, you're going to get about 1,500 winning streaks of 5 games or more and 1,500 losing streaks of 5 games or more, or a total of a little over 3,000 streaks in 100,000 games. So as the team is better and their probability of winning or their winning percentage goes up above 500, the green line is the win streaks. The number of win streaks are going to grow. And obviously the number of losing streaks of 5 or more is going to decrease. But notice what happens. The winning streaks go up faster than the losing streaks decrease. So as the team gets better than 500 and moves away, it's going to have more total streaks. Okay. The reverse happens on this side with the losing streaks. Again, losing streaks increase this way, winning streaks decrease, but total streaks again increase. So we could say the more a team's winning percentage deviates from 500, the greater number of total expected streaks. Okay. Good. All right. So now let's talk about. I got some equations now. I got some stuff. I'm going to have to compare this to some real data. Okay. So I had to get game results. I had to get every win, loss, and tie for all franchises in sequence. And, I used Baseball Reference and Retro Sheet, both of them. I used Retro Sheet earlier when I started this, before I even knew about Baseball Reference. And there were some differences I found between them, and I had to resolve them. But basically, I used those 2 websites. Once I had all that data, all I had was wins and losses. Didn't do me any good. I had to encode each decision, some coded numerical value. And having done that, that gives me the ability to filter, extract streaks, do whatever I want with the data. So that's what I have. So let's just look briefly at the data for MLB. This is through 2024. I've updated some of these charts for this past year, not necessarily every single one, but pre-expansion was through 1960. There were 60 seasons, nice, consistent 16 teams in the league. So there were a total of 16 times 60 or 960 team seasons. A team season is the record for one team for one season. Okay, post-expansion, which began in 61, went to 18 teams, went all the way to 30 and 98. So in those 64 seasons since 1961, there's been a total of 1,716 team seasons. So, you know, about almost 2/3 of the history of baseball, 65% in terms of team seasons, games, etc., has occurred post-expansion, beginning in 1961. Okay. One thing that is different, though, is ties or non-decisions. By pre-expansion, 90% of the 777 non-decision games we've had have occurred. That's primarily due to no lights on fields and darkness, and games be declared a tie or no decision. Post-expansion, we've had 81 ties. There's only been one tie since 2005. That occurred in 2016, late in September, between the Pirates and the Cubs. They were 1-1, middle of the game, rains came, and they decided at one point they don't have to suspend it, they don't have to play it to completion. Had no bearing on the National League pennant, so it was declared a no decision. That's the only one in the last 19 years. Okay. All right. So now, if I'm talking about streakiness and deviation, performance deviation, how far from 500 a team is, I got to measure this somehow. Okay. So I came up with two metrics to measure one each, I should say. So for measuring streakiness, I came up with called the total streak quotient. And for deviation, I called it the average deviation. This is for that, I call it performance diversity, how far from 500 the teams are in a given season. Okay. Now, these metrics allow me to actually compare different seasons, even though there might be less teams or more games. It's independent of the number of games or teams in the league. Okay. I'm not going to go over all the details here, but let me just say that the total streak quotient, again, is a numerical value that characterizes the degree of streakiness. And the way it's formed is I count the number of streak wins plus the number of streak losses, that quantity divided by the number of decisions. Now, a streak win is defined as a win during the season that's part of a 5-game or greater winning streak. Okay. A streak loss is a loss during the season that is part of a 5-game or greater losing streak. So there are some teams that never get a streak win or never get a streak loss because they never exceed 4-game streaks. Okay. So a particular example I got here is just the 1914 Reds. They had a total streak quotient of 487. This is how it was formed. They were a very streaky team. The average total streak quotient for all 124 seasons is 0.222. Very streaky. They had a 19-game losing streak, 7, 8, not 2 7s and 8. So that's total streak quotient. Average deviation. A deviation for a single team is nothing more than the difference between their winning percentage and 500, the absolute value. Okay. So if they're winning 100 games, that's 617 minus the 500. Their 0.117 is their single team deviation. To get average deviation, if we're talking about multiple teams, say we're looking at a particular season to see how much deviation there is, you basically sum up that deviation, single team deviation for all teams. So in this particular case, 1960 American League, we have an average deviation of 0.068, which is pretty much what the average for all seasons are. By the way, I think I skipped this on the last slide, but for 2024, the average deviation was 0.058. There was little less deviation in spite of the White Sox. Average-wise, there was little less deviation. And let me just go back real quick to give you this number. If I can. Too far. Oh, total streak quotient. The average is 222. 2024 was 0.186. That's one of the lowest. Very bad year for streaks. Fewer streaks than expected. Or we expect fewer streaks because of the lower average deviation, but the actual streaks were even less than that. And that's in spite of the White Sox. Okay, so if we plot versus the season here, the total streak quotient by year, which is this jagged line here, remember the average is 222. And then we plot down here the average deviation kind of in a bar format, the average being like 0.068. And you look at this, and I've shown where expansion happened here. You see what appears to be more streakiness pre-expansion than post. And you see the same thing for more deviation than post. I've also shown a 5-season moving average, this dotted red line for total streak quotient, and this dash red line, I should say, and this is a dotted blue line. And you can visually see the correlation, okay? However, a better way to look at this would be to combine a coordinate with these two values together against the year. So that's basically what this does. This is called a scatter plot. Ooh, I went away from it. So along the horizontal axis here is I'm plotting the average deviation. Increasing deviation of diversity is to the right, higher. The average, I said, was 0.069 for all seasons. The vertical axis is the total streak quotient, the amount of streakiness. The more streaky, the higher. Okay, and remember it was 222. So this is the average. And if you look at all the seasons here, the red dots represent pre-expansion data through 60. The black dots post-expansion beginning in 1961. You'll see much more of a dominance of the red dots in the streakiness and diversity side and a lot less post-expansion, okay? 2024 is way down here, okay? One of the lowest total streak quotient years. And again, the White Sox did everything they could to contribute to that, but there weren't too many other teams, okay? You see so many in this quadrant, so many in this quadrant, and there's a few that are kind of outliers here, but it's like less than 25% of the seasons. And the biggest outliers we've had is 1914, which was much more streaky than it should have been given the deviation. And 1934 was the opposite. It had fairly high deviation, but it had very low streakiness, okay? All right, so that's it for comparing streakiness to performance diversity. Now we want to go and start predicting how many streaks we have in Major League Baseball since 1901. And how does that compare to the actual number of streaks, okay? I'm not going to dwell too much on this unless somebody wants to talk more about it, but I basically had 3 prediction methodologies, something I call global, which just used my model one time, something I called seasonal, which basically used the model for each season, and then the team season prediction, which uses the model for each team season. So through 2024, it's 2,676 times. And so you sum the winning streak for each of those seasons, the losing streaks for each of those seasons, and then, the total streaks, all right, for the prediction, okay, because I'm going to be predicting streaks here.
Right.
All right, so jumping forward, I'm not going to, spend any time giving you the actual streaks. That's probably written up in the paper, but this is the comparing the predicted number of streaks versus actual, okay, over these 416,000 plus decisions in 124 years. So the three predictions are shown by this blue line, the dashed black line, and the solid black line, okay, with the solid black line being the team season prediction, and the red line with the dots are the number of actual streaks of each streak length along the bottom here. And you know, when I came up with this, I was pretty astounded. I thought this was really neat. And then as I think about it a little bit more, and I understand what's really going on with this performance diversity, you know, it's not so surprising. I mean, that's one of the reasons why this team season prediction matches the actuals for so much better, because, you know, if there is a team like the White Sox this past year that had a very, very low winning percentage, you know, they're going to get a lot of predicted streaks based on that winning percentage. Now, naturally, they had 21, they had 14. They probably didn't have that many discrete streaks. They had a lot of streak losses. But, you know, when we're looking over at the full global history of baseball here, you know, it tends to average out. So, yeah, last year we did have another 22 one-game streak. It was the White Sox losing streak. They had a 14-game losing streak. The longest winning streak we had last year was the Twins. They had a 12-game streak. And so if you look at this curve, I mean, this is a logarithmic plot. Again, maybe you don't know what logarithmic plots are. I'll just say that each horizontal line is a factor of 10. Okay, so this is 100 here, that's 1,000. This allows us to kind of compare on the same chart, you know, very large numbers and small numbers. But when you look down here, we're talking about single digit number of streaks. Okay, so even though this looks like it's going up and coming down and this is below, there's not that much of a difference. Okay, you could hypothesize a situation where, you know, if a 19 and a couple 20s at a 21 game losing streak, you know, had a loss inserted there at game 16, these would be right down on this line and this would be right up on that line. So it's pretty amazing to me. And if you look at the total number of streaks over 124 years, the difference between the prediction and the actuals is only 0.8%. It's like 105 now. It was, I think it was a little under 100 last year. So we were off another 5 or so, 10 this year, I should say. Okay. All right. So that's 124 seasons. Looks like it makes some sense. What? Okay, let me just divert here a little bit, because I've also done this database for the NHL and the NBA, National Hockey League, and National Basketball Association. So you might be a little curious, or if you're not, I'm going to make sure you're
National
curious.
Hockey League for sure. As someone who,
what
who lives in Vancouver with the Canucks,
okay,
the NHL
okay.
team.
So,
you know,
again, what I had to do to compare these sports, they've all played different number of team seasons, and, you know, they've been around different lengths of time. Baseball the longest, you know, the NBA the shortest. So I've normalized the actual. Well, this is the prediction. I've normalized the predictions to 100,000 decisions. So I've taken their actual number of seasons with the actual winning percentages, and then I scaled it down by whatever the decisions were. And you can see, and I'm showing you what the average deviation is. Remember, more deviation means more streaks. Okay, so we said MLB had that deviation of like 0.069, which is the lowest of the three sports. The NHL is in the middle, and the NBA is the most diverse. And you can watch the NBA standings every year, and you've got teams that are, you know, playing around, you know, 0.200, and others that are, you know, approaching 750 or above. So, and that's exactly what you would expect from a prediction point of view. A lot more streaks for the NBA than the NHL than MLB. Now, comparing that to actuals, I've done the same thing with the actuals here. Again, I've normalized it to 100,000 actual decisions. And you can kind of see the NBA's on top with the most streaks. The NHL's in the middle, a little bit of a crossover here when you get to 20-game streaks. NHL doesn't like a lot of 20-game streaks. Baseball does a little bit better. But these are the number of team seasons. And by the way, this is only through 2023. So that's why there's 26, 46 team seasons here and a smaller number of decisions. So it's interesting to me. I hope it is to you too. Okay, the last part here is we've been looking globally at the league forever. What about season by season? How accurate can this be in a given season? So what I'm showing here is, again, baseball back to baseball, the 124 seasons. I've included 2024 in here. And what the black line is the prediction of the total number of streaks. Obviously, there were less teams pre-expansion, so you're going to get on the order of 90 streaks a season. The expansion area, it grows. And of course, by 1998 here, we got to our full complement of 30 teams. So this plateau is higher here. You can see strike years, games weren't played. COVID year, they played 60 games, okay? The red is the actual number of 5-game or greater streaks. It's a little bit jagged, but it jags around the prediction, okay? So that's that. Okay, one more to show you. Another way to look at this is, what if we formed the ratio season by season between the actual and predicted streaks? So that's what this is. So here I'm showing the actual number of streaks to the predicted number of streaks, that ratio. And here's one, and these are plus and minus 15% boundaries, okay? So you can see that over the 124 seasons of baseball, the ratio has been outside the 50% boundary only 13 times, mostly on the high end, and not so much post-expansion. Okay, about 10.5% of the time. So that's what I have to share with you today. Any questions at the end or comments?
I'm blown away. Wow. And I have one of my degrees is in math, and I'm following along with you.
Okay.
I didn't learn half of this in my first degree, so that's impressive, Ed. Alec,
Okay.
you're up.
Yeah, thanks. It was great. My math professor would be impressed, as we are.
Right?
I guess one observation off of this chart is that I think that if there were, kind of hot hands and cold hands, then you'd expect this not to be at 1. You'd expect it to be a little bit higher than 1, and it doesn't really look like it is. Is that fair?
Well, again, that's difficult to quantify. I mean, if you say hot hands, that's probably going to translate to higher winning percentages. Okay,
Well, hot or
higher
cold,
winning percentages
either way.
is
Momentum.
going to reflect more streaks when you go through the expected streak equations. One of the things let me just say a couple words about something else my brother and I have been looking at. I'm not going to get too much detail here, but people, when I discuss this with people, they bring up 2 questions. They say, how is this going to help me gambling? and what about
Really? Oh, gee whiz.
well,
of course. I'm not surprised at all.
People don't understand that
You're right.
we do this research because we love this stuff. There's no hidden motive here. Okay, but I did take a look at one thing, and do streaks, we're looking at streaks extending or streaks terminating. Okay, and I will say this, that there's a much greater likelihood of a streak extending than terminating. It's about 55% to 45%. And it applies to winning streaks and losing streaks, and it applies pretty much out to 18-game streaks. Okay.
Wow.
So if you were to bet and get even odds on betting that a 5-game streak would extend versus terminate, you'd win 11 times out of 20 in your bet. The problem is, the odds typically are not going to be as good to vote to bet on a good team, to extend a streak. It's going to be a lot less heads. It's going to be the favorite, than the other one. So, so that's, again, another thing about, you talk about momentum. I did this chart based on my streaks just to see if there was momentum. And when I saw 55-45, I said, wow, that looks like momentum. Well, I ran it through my simulator. I basically, parsed out all the seasonal data and created a certain number of seasons with a certain win percentage.
Right.
And I ran that, and it looked almost the same. And when I put 50-50 in for each game, it was 50-50. So it's not momentum. It's just diversity. It's the fact that you have good teams and you have bad teams. And one of the things that kind of occurred to me too is, I don't have any analysis or data on this, but when we're talking pre-expansion, there's only 8 teams. There were some really good teams and really bad teams. That's just the nature of the game back then. Some owners could put together good teams, and others just couldn't or didn't choose to. And so with just an 8-team league, there's going to be an average, diversity that's going to be bigger. When you get to modern baseball, and everybody's trying to compete, the Rays can do it on less money and still be good. And there's the money that the team's spending over a certain limit have to pay to the other teams, the salary caps, or not the caps, but I can't think of the name offhand. But it's kind of natural that you would expect less streaks and less diversity, with 30 teams as opposed to having 16. So
Alec has a follow-up question.
Okay.
Yeah. Another thought I had was that there would be more streaks in the second half of the year because some teams are driving for the playoffs, some teams are out of it. And I think there would be more dispersion in later in the year, in my view, than there would be in the.
I hear you. I would have to spend time doing that. I have the data.
Huh.
I have the data to look at that. That could be a subject for another paper down the road. I mean, there's so much here. In fact, they published my historical version of this in the fall journal, and they wanted some kind of conclusion from me. What did I learn from doing the analytical stuff and then the historical stuff? And part of what I shared was, this is my first SABR conference, SABR 52, and I loved it. Not only did I get to meet Bruce and a bunch of other passionate baseball people, so I said, go out, seek out your local chapter, get hooked up with guys that share your passion for the game. I mean, Don can attest. We've got a great little group. It's not that huge, but it's a fantastic group. We get together once a month or so.
It is.
So, go ahead, Don.
No, it really is. I remember when you were telling us you were working on this, and you said, when I get most of this done, I will show it to you guys. And we're like, well, I wonder what he's doing. The next thing you know, you told us what it was. And then you said, I'm going to the SABR convention and I'm going to be presenting this. And I said, wow, this is coming from our group, not someone else's. This was fantastic.
Hey, Don, nice to see you tonight. I'm glad you showed up. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime, my friend. Don't forget that. Come on any of our meetings. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
You want to see any of the database?
Does anybody want to see any of the database tonight? You can also contact Ed directly if you'd like to see some of the database with him. I just want to interject that one of the things that you will find if you go to a convention or you get involved in your local chapter or what have you is that directly, SABR is not just a bunch of guys sitting around a table talking about baseball. You're going to find a diverse population of men, women, those who identify in ways that are not the traditional male and female. And we all have one thing in common, and that's baseball. And most of us have a a modicum of knowledge that we can participate in any sort of discussion like this one tonight. This has been a really high level and fascinating discussion on the statistics of streaks, but I don't want to negate the contributions that many of our spectacular and brilliant women have made in this organization over the years. Dixie Tarango, you are up. How are you, Dix?
I'm fine. I'm as
Go
fine
get
as
'em.
I'm as fine as your kitty.
Thank you. That's great.
Ed, have you thought about doing all this in terms of home and away games?
That's been brought up to me. That I've thought about it, but that's going to be a real challenge because the data that I pulled for all these decisions and the way I've got it coded, I don't have whether they're home and away. So I would somehow have to go back and pull all that and have another database that or data file that is tied to this one that gives me that information. It's a fascinating subject. I think it would be really interesting to pursue, but I haven't. And the reason I haven't is because the database, the graphical database that I can show you if you're interested, lends itself to just consecutive games, whether they're home or away. To somehow show things graphically home or away, is a challenge I haven't even given any thought to. But no, that's a real good idea. It'd be a lot of work for me, and I'll tell you what, it'd be infinitely more work for anybody else that doesn't have the coded database that I have.
Wow, Ed, this has been quite a presentation, I got to say. Now, next week, Tuesday, November 12th, we're going to have fellow SABR member David Smith with us, who will give his SABR 52 presentation entitled, Where Did the 24 Minutes Go?
Oh, I love that one.
He was great, wasn't he? He was just great. I was in on this one, and it was fantastic. Ed, I think will back me up on that as well. The meeting begins at 7 p.m. Eastern. All baseball fans are welcome, and the sign-up link is in the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Ed Denta, you are fantastic. This has been a very interesting presentation, and I am so happy you did it. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.
Let's get everybody out of here. We'll see you next week on Tuesday, November 12th. We'll let everybody enjoy Veterans Day and thank a veteran for their support, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night, everybody.